Israel received 3 more hostages from Hamas on Saturday as a part of their hostage and ceasefire deal with the terrorist group. Now, the condition of these 3 were noticeably much, much worse than the hostages who were released before them, prompting strong reactions from both Israel and the U.S. Even the UN Human Rights Office expressed concern today. Now, according to the reports, Hamas intends to delay the next hostage prisoner exchange that was slated for this coming Saturday, alleging that Israel has violated the agreement. Now, is this fragile deal coming apart? Joining me now from Jerusalem to discuss this is Chris Mitchell, Middle East Bureau Chief for CBN News. Chris, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Tony.
All right, a lot to talk about. I want to get reactions from the Israeli population to Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit here to D.C. last week. But I want to start first with the reaction this weekend to the release of these latest hostages and the condition that they were in.
Well, Tony, I would say there would be outrage throughout the country, especially its leaders, Israeli President Isaac Herzog, Prime Minister Netanyahu. I spoke yesterday to Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell and just said the scenes there were just heartbreaking. And she not only blamed Hamas, but she also blamed the United Nations for not advocating for the hostages, and especially the Red Cross, who actually participated and has for the last several weeks in the hostage releases, and yet hasn't taken the time or fought, as she said, to go ahead and make sure there were visits to these prisoners held in captivity for over 490 days. We know that their conditions were just horrific. Many of them, I think these men were kept in tunnels for the entire captivity, left on a starvation diet. Many people here, comparing their appearance to what appeared to many of the hostages, the Holocaust survivors, that is, and evokes echoes of the Holocaust. So throughout Israel, I think just heart-wrenching and horrific images that they had to see, just gut-wrenching. And one more ride on this emotional roller coaster that Israelis have been on ever since October 7th, and especially in this last several weeks of these hostage releases week by week, but apparently now stopped by Hamas.
One other aspect of this that this is not the first time we've seen it, but these 3 were kind of paraded around, forced by armed terrorists to read statements before their release. I mean, this is, this clearly is not a part of the agreement to parade them through the streets in front of terrorists as if they were trophies.
Exactly. And the one before that, some of the hostages were literally surrounded by crowds that were just pressing on them and Hamas gunmen. So this is a propaganda tool by Hamas. Actually, we understand that an Al Jazeera journalist helped stage some of these events. You have the parading up there. There's a banner behind them. One of the banners has said Zionism will not win. So it's all part of a propaganda effort by Hamas to humiliate these hostages. And actually part of their plan has been for months, and that was discovered by documents by Yahya Sinwar, the former or the late Hamas leader, to help divide Israeli society. Those that on one hand want to do anything to release the hostages, even with the many hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, or even an end of the war. So this is all part of the dilemma that Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Security Cabinet have to deal with, how to manage and decide how to proceed with the war, as well as trying to release all of these hostages, both dead and alive.
I mean, this has got to be an extremely difficult situation for the Prime Minister and his war cabinet, because I can imagine if you were a hostage family, I mean, you want your loved one released. You want to get them home no matter what. But now we've heard originally that there was some expectation that those in better condition would be released first. They would hold back others. And then with what we witnessed this weekend, you have to wonder what the condition is of those that are remaining as hostages.
That's right. And, some of the hostages been saying exactly what kind of conditions they were in. Some didn't see actually any other hostages for their entire captivity, just to the very end. We've heard reports that Hamas has actually had to teach some of these captives to walk because they weren't able to walk because of the restricted diet they were on, malnourished, and in a very, very difficult physical condition. There's several groups here, Tony, in Israel. First of all, you have the hostage families, and as you say, they want to do anything they can to get their loved ones freed. And also, but you have the people that know that the Palestinian prisoners that have been released will likely and historically will go on to commit other terror attacks. So you have Israelis who wonder who could be the next victims of terror. Or in some of these murderers, the victim families are seeing that these perpetrators of murders of their loved ones are released. And then you have, Tony, the men and women who have fallen in battle, and their families are saying, we don't necessarily want the end of the war. We don't want those members of our families to have died in vain. So such a difficult time for Israeli society on so many levels.
Yeah. A clear prayer point for us back here in the States, praying for the leadership there in Israel, praying for a managed peace to emerge out of this. And so that really sets me up for my next question, Chris Mitchell, is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and members of his team were here in Washington last week, had a chance to meet with him on Monday evening before he met with President Trump. I think, and having spoken to some of those around him after his meeting with Trump, the meeting went much better than they anticipated. Very positive meeting. So you've heard the public comments from the Prime Minister glowing about the meeting. Close relationship, strong statements of support coming from the president. What was the reaction there in Jerusalem and beyond there in Israel to the meeting last week?
Well, I think for one, Tony, Israelis are just exuberant about President Trump and the kind of support that he gave to Prime Minister Netanyahu last week, the kind of greeting he gave at the White House, for that matter, a huge difference than what would happen under the previous administration, where now Israelis feel like they have a tailwind behind them with the U.S. backing them and President Trump. But for the last 16 months or so, before January 20th, they had a headwind with the Biden administration, keeping weapons from them and not helping them diplomatically. So just a sea change in the difference, and I think Israelis are quite excited. They're also, and I was talking to some of them earlier today. They're quite agreeable to this whole idea of what's going on in Gaza. This whole idea that they would relocate the people from Gaza, and then the U.S. and other nations would come and rebuild Gaza. Whether or not that actually is going to come to fruition remains to be seen. But I think Israelis here really, really appreciate the new administration and the new White House.
I spoke to some of the president's advisors over the weekend regarding that proposal, and I think clearly it was designed to shake up the conversation and move beyond the old narrative of, well, we need a two-state solution. And it's, it never has resulted in anything because it's unworkable. And I think October the 7th has proven that a two-state solution there does not work. So I think the president is trying to create a broader conversation and involve many of the surrounding nations in getting involved in this, because they've been pretty much hands off. They don't want to touch the Palestinian issue. This, I think, will force them to the table.
Yeah, and there's many reasons why they don't want to deal with the Palestinian issue. Ever since October 7th, for one, Egypt has had closed border, and they haven't allowed hardly any of the Palestinians to leave Gaza, although that's what's happened historically in many conflicts where refugees are allowed to leave. And so that's something that Egypt has really been resisting. Historically, it's been very difficult for Jordan and/or Egypt to bring in people that have been raised on an ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, which represents a mortal threat to both of these countries. So that's part of the reluctance that they're going through right now. And also, Tony, just in the last few hours, as you said, Hamas is abrogating the deal. They're blaming Israel for it. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu, that is, coming from a wonderful week of meetings from Congress to the White House, but now coming into a crisis. The Israeli Defense Minister Yaakov Katz is saying the IDF is going to be put up to its highest alert inside Gaza. So we're not only maybe looking at an end of the hostage deal, maybe a resumption of fighting inside Gaza, and certainly a time to be praying for all of the leaders of Israel, for all of the Israelis, especially the hostages' families, but what may happen in the decisions being made as we speak right now in the Security Cabinet.
Chris Mitchell, we just have a few minutes left. I'm going to dig a little deeper into that, explore that a little further, because now the situation is you've got Hamas saying the deal's off, we're not going to release these other hostages. Well, that then triggers a political reaction on the Israeli side of the equation, which forces the prime minister, because you have some conservative members to his right that are saying, look, we need to finish this thing anyway. But then he's got the hostage families that are saying, we've got to get these hostages back, and this deal appears to be the only way to do it. This is a very difficult way forward.
It's a very difficult, delicate balancing act that the prime minister has to go through. Ben Gvir, who is one of the political parties that actually has left the government in the last month or so, he's saying we need a full-out assault on Gaza right now. But you also have the decision to be made about what to do. And I think it seems to be clear right now that really this is Hamas that's making this decision. And if we look in a broader perspective, Tony, probably Iran may be pulling some of the strings behind the scenes. And that is another major issue that I'm sure President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu talked about. But a very difficult political, delicate balancing act that Prime Minister Netanyahu has to go through right now.
I would think obviously the families lose out here, because I think this may be the last chance for a clear resolution of the hostage situation. But Hamas and the Palestinians are going to lose out big time, because then there's no reason not to eliminate Hamas and move forward with even the proposal that President Trump put on the table of basically clearing out the Gaza Strip and moving the Palestinians out. I mean, they could be the big losers in this.
Very much so. In fact, they've been the big losers since October 7th, even though they're claiming victory. And right now, and also Hamas spokesmen are saying October 7th is not the end. They want to continue the fight to eradicate Israel, kill the Jews. So their fight continues to go on, even though they're sort of doing this out of the rubble of the last 16 months of fighting. And as your point, Tony, it may be the hostage families that are tragically not going to be able to survive this, or their loved ones not be able to survive. So it would allow Israel to go in if Hamas is going to be intractable and saying the deal is over and we're not going to allow any more of the hostages released. So such a tragic situation for many of these families, but they're holding on to prayer and hope.
All right, Chris Mitchell, we're out of time for today. I want to thank you for joining us. But just to recap here, we need to be praying for the Prime Minister and his war cabinet as they decide the way forward. We need to be praying for the hostages, for their release, and for the hostage families that have to bear the grief and the burden of this. Chris Mitchell, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Tony.